What if the world beneath our feet is less known than the stars above us? We like to think we've charted the Earth, that satellite eyes have mapped every forest, desert, and shoreline, that GPS can locate us down to the sidewalk, that the age of exploration ended long ago. But this confidence is an illusion, because beneath the surface lies a different planet, dark, ancient, and largely unmapped. Caves are the Earth's forgotten frontier. They open quietly in cliffsides and crevices, swallowed by shadow. Some lead nowhere. Others go further than we ever imagined. They descend through stone like time machines, revealing fossils, artifacts, and life forms sealed away for millennia. They offer entry not just into the Earth's crust, but into lost worlds, vanished civilizations, and ecosystems that shouldn't exist. And occasionally, what lies below seems to violate the rules of science altogether. In this journey, we'll descend into 10 caves discovered in the past century. Each one challenged belief. Each one revealed something that seemed impossible. From the jungles of Vietnam to the deserts of Mexico, from the ice of Siberia to the depths of the Bahamas, these caves are more than geological curiosities. They are portals to mystery, memory, and the parts of Earth that remain untouched by time or reason. Some caves, like Movile in Romania, contain entire ecosystems that evolved without sunlight. Others, like the Cave of the Crystals in Mexico, hold formations so immense and extreme they defy natural explanation. Still others hint at human presence where it should not be. Underground cities carved long before history recorded their builders, artifacts found in chambers deep beneath the sea, and legends that align too closely with what explorers later find. Many of these places are now sealed. Some were flooded again after accidental discoveries. Others are protected by governments or local communities. A few are simply too dangerous to revisit. The stories that survive often walk the line between myth and documentation. A man claims to lower 15 miles of line into a hole without finding the bottom. Divers discover horizontal tunnels at the bottom of the deepest blue hole. An expedition in the Ecuadorian jungle reports geometric carvings in stone chambers that should be natural. Skeptics urge caution. They cite hoaxes and exaggerations, the Mayan tendency to see patterns where none exist. But skepticism doesn't explain everything. It doesn't explain why organisms survive in toxic air with no sunlight, or how massive underground cities were ventilated without modern tools, or why crystal caverns contain bacteria sealed away for tens of thousands of years, bacteria that came back to life. These aren't stories of the paranormal, they're stories of the unknown. And the unknown is never comfortable. In this series, we won't offer conspiracies. We won't claim proof of lost continents or ancient aliens. But we will tell you about places that stretch the boundaries of what science currently accepts. And we'll do it by tracing a single theme: caves that lead to places that shouldn't exist. Because in the silence beneath the surface, where light fades and stone speaks, our understanding of the world breaks open. And what we find in the dark is never just rock and dust. It's something that changes how we see ourselves. This is a journey into the Earth, into wonder, into questions, into places long hidden, into the silence that remains when the known world ends. And it starts with a hole so deep its bottom has never been found. It started with a man named Mel and a hole that shouldn't have existed. In 1997, a caller phoned into a late-night radio show with a voice that was calm, almost matter-of-fact. He introduced himself as Mel Waters and claimed that on his rural Washington property there was a hole, not just any hole, a bottomless pit. He said it had always been there. The locals knew it, used it, even feared it. They tossed in trash, dead animals, broken appliances. Nothing ever came back. Nothing ever made a sound. The hole swallowed everything. Out of curiosity, Mel began to test its depth. He tied a weight to the end of a fishing line and lowered it in. Thousands of feet passed. Still nothing. He kept going. 10,000. 20. Eventually, he let out more than 80,000 feet, over 15 miles, before he ran out of line. And still the bottom remained untouched. That should have been the end, but Mel claimed more. He said he lowered a dead dog into the hole and that it came back alive, returned by someone or something from the depths. He spoke of a black beam of light rising from the pit, a kind of darkness so dense it was visible even at night. Then he said government agents arrived. They wanted his land, pressured him to leave. He vanished not long after, leaving behind a story that has never been proven, never been conclusively debunked, and never quite gone away. Skeptics dismissed it as a hoax. No one has ever found the hole. No geological surveys confirm its existence. The area where Mel's property supposedly stood is now part of a military training zone, closed to the public. No trace remains, if it was ever there. And yet the story resonates, because it echoes something ancient and primal, the idea that beneath us lie depths not meant for human eyes, the notion that some doors once opened can't be closed. Mel's Hole is part of a long lineage of myths about bottomless pits, gateways to other worlds, places where the laws of physics break down. But unlike myth, this one arrived in the modern age, on the radio, in the voice of a man who sounded like he believed every word. Was it all invented? A fabrication for entertainment? Possibly. But the story gained traction because it tapped into something deeper than truth. It tapped into fear. The fear that the earth itself may hold secrets we're not ready to face. What if there are places where gravity behaves differently, where time doesn't flow as it should, where the dead do not stay dead? Mel's Hole, whether real or imagined, became a symbol, a metaphor for everything we haven't yet explored, for the limits of science, for the things that vanish without explanation, for the voices that speak once and disappear. No physical evidence has ever surfaced, but neither has a satisfying explanation. What matters is not the hole itself, but the question it raises. How much of the world beneath us remains unmeasured, unseen, and ultimately unknowable? The ground may feel solid, but sometimes it opens. And when it does, the line between the real and the impossible becomes very thin indeed. It began with a whisper in the jungle and a name passed down in legend. Cueva de los Taios, the cave of the oil birds. In the dense rainforests of Ecuador, cloaked by vines and humidity, lies a cave system that stretches deep beneath the Amazonian floor. For generations, the Shuar people treated it as sacred. They spoke of spirits who lived in the earth and of a hidden world beneath the stone. But in the 20th century, stories emerged of something even stranger, an underground library. Not of scrolls or parchment, but of books made of metal, etched with symbols no one could decipher. In 1976, the story reached a crescendo. The Ecuadorian government authorized a large-scale expedition to the site. The team was astonishing, not just local scientists, but international experts, military personnel, and even astronauts. Among them was Neil Armstrong, the first man on the moon, who served as the mission's honorary leader. The goal was to find what a Hungarian-Argentine explorer, Juan Morix, had claimed to see years earlier, a vast chamber carved with geometric precision, filled with golden artifacts, stone statues, and metallic plates covered in unknown writing. A library left behind by an ancient civilization, perhaps not of this world. The expedition found strange things. They documented chambers that did not appear natural, walls too smooth, angles too sharp, patterns too deliberate. They found artifacts whose origin was unclear, but when the team returned, they said they found no metal library. Some whispered otherwise, that discoveries were made but hidden, that photos disappeared, that political and scientific pressure forced a silence no one could break. The truth remains buried. Access to the cave was later restricted. Parts of it are now off-limits to protect the local environment and the Shuar's cultural heritage. Only a fraction of the system has been mapped. Some chambers require technical climbing skills and descend far beyond the reach of most visitors. The Shuar still speak of the beings who emerged from the earth long before the Spanish arrived. They describe chambers that hold knowledge not meant for the outside world, and they say the time will come, but not yet, not until we are ready. Skeptics call it fantasy, yet the cave is real. The chambers are real. The accounts of precise architecture and unexplained artifacts are real. What if the library exists but has not yet been found? What if it was seen once and hidden again? What if it was never meant for those who came looking with cameras and tools, but for those who remembered why the cave mattered in the first place? The cave of the Taios leads somewhere. That much is certain. It contains secrets of geology, of history, perhaps of humanity itself. And it asks a question that echoes through the stone. What kind of knowledge lies so deep that it must be hidden underground until the world is ready to receive it? It was sealed off from the world for 5.5 million years. In 1986, near the Romanian town of Mangalia, workers were preparing the ground for a power plant when they broke through into something unimaginable. A crack opened beneath their feet, not just into a cave, but into an ecosystem untouched by light, air, or life as we know it. They had stumbled into Movile Cave. From the surface, it looked like nothing. A narrow opening, some limestone, a shallow descent. But inside, the atmosphere was different. The air was thick with hydrogen sulfide and carbon dioxide, almost no oxygen. The temperature was stable, the light non-existent. In every way, it was a place hostile to life. And yet life was there. Scientists were stunned. Spiders, scorpions, leeches, and other invertebrates moved through the darkness, pale, blind, and perfectly adapted to their sunless world. Over 50 species were identified. At least 35 had never been seen anywhere else on Earth. Unlike surface ecosystems, which rely on sunlight and photosynthesis, Movile's ecosystem runs on chemosynthesis. Bacteria feed on chemical reactions involving sulfur and methane. Other creatures feed on the bacteria. An entire food chain, self-contained, self-sustaining, and entirely alien. Movile isn't large, just a few hundred meters of passages, but its importance is vast. It proved that life doesn't need the sun, that organisms can evolve in isolation for millions of years, forming their own worlds beneath our own. And it raises a question that science is still trying to answer. How many other caves like Movile exist, sealed away beneath our feet? Access to the cave is tightly restricted. Fewer than 100 people have ever entered. Visitors must pass through airlocks to avoid contaminating the atmosphere. Even breathing in Movile is dangerous. Yet what it reveals is priceless. A separate evolutionary branch, life forms that may as well have come from another planet. What if Movile is not unique? What if there are dozens, hundreds of such pockets around the world, hidden under rock, waiting in silence? Places where time has moved differently, where life followed other rules. Places we haven't found, not because they aren't there, but because we've never looked in the right way. Movile reminds us that the surface is not everything, that Earth hides its oldest stories in the dark. And sometimes those stories are still alive. It challenges the idea that Earth is one ecosystem, because deep underground it has another. And that second world is older, stranger, and far more resilient than we ever imagined. A world that shouldn't exist, and yet it does, right beneath our feet. It began with a breeze, cold, steady, unnatural. In 1991, deep in the jungle of Vietnam's Phong Nha Ke Bang region, a farmer named Ho Khan stumbled upon an opening in the limestone cliffs. He was searching for food, but what he found was something else entirely. A wind rushed from the dark, carrying the sound of a distant river echoing far below. He didn't go in. The jungle was dangerous enough without stepping into a void. For nearly 2 decades, no one returned. Then in 2009, Khan led a British-Vietnamese expedition back to the site. What they discovered would alter everything we thought we knew about caves. They called it Sundong, Mountain River Cave. It wasn't just a cave, it was a world. Sundong holds the largest known cave passage on Earth. The main chamber is more than 3 miles long, 650 feet wide, and over 500 feet high. A Boeing 747 could fly through it without touching the walls, but the scale is only the beginning. Inside, the cave generates its own weather. Clouds drift through its vast interior. Rain falls from its ceiling. Air pressure, temperature, and moisture levels fluctuate to form an internal climate system, sealed off from the world above. And then there are the dolines, massive skylights where the cave ceiling collapsed long ago. Through these holes, sunlight pours in, nurturing entire jungles inside the cave. Trees stretch toward the light. Monkeys swing through the branches. Birds nest in canopies that grow hundreds of feet below the surface. Species exist here that don't exist anywhere else. Sundong is an ecosystem wrapped in stone, a world that evolved in parallel to ours, unseen, untouched, complete. Researchers found blind fish in the underground rivers, albino insects in the deepest passages, and vast limestone formations unlike any seen elsewhere. They found rooms so vast their headlamps couldn't reach the walls. Chambers where the darkness pressed in like a physical weight. And still, they've only scratched the surface. The cave is part of a much larger system. New passages continue to be discovered. Some believe it may connect to other massive caves in the region, forming an underground labyrinth that rivals anything on Earth. Tourism is tightly restricted. Only a few hundred people are allowed in each year, and only with expert guides. The Vietnamese government has resisted efforts to commercialize the cave, protecting its fragile environment from the damage of mass tourism. Because Sundong isn't just big, it isn't just beautiful. It is something almost philosophical, a reminder that entire worlds can exist parallel to our own, unseen until the moment someone notices a strange breeze in the jungle. It defies categories, not just a cave, not just a landscape, not just a natural wonder. It is a hidden planet beneath a mountain, a realm with its own weather, forests, species, and secrets. And it makes us ask, how many other worlds wait just beneath the surface, breathing in silence, waiting for someone to listen? It looked like a scene from another planet, glowing, silent, deadly. In the year 2000, miners beneath Nika Mountain in Chihuahua, Mexico, broke into a cavern 1,000 feet below the surface. When their lights pierced the darkness, what they saw stopped them cold. Enormous crystals, some as long as city buses, stretching across the chamber in impossible formations. They had entered the cave of the crystals. The room was cathedral-like in scale, but alien in every other way. The crystals, made of selenite, reached up to 36 feet in length and weighed over 50 tons. They intersected at strange angles, formed over 500,000 years by superheated groundwater rich in mineral content. The environment that created them was delicate, stable, and uninhabitable to humans. Inside, the air temperature hovered around 136 degrees Celsius, with nearly 100% humidity. Breathing was difficult. Movement was dangerous. Without specially designed cooling suits and oxygen systems, a person would collapse in minutes. And yet, it wasn't just the crystals that made the cave remarkable. Trapped within the crystals were tiny pockets of ancient fluid, preserved bubbles from an earlier Earth. Scientists extracted dormant microbes from some of these inclusions, organisms that had been sealed for tens of thousands of years, possibly longer. When revived, they came back to life. It was as if the crystals had kept time in stasis. Not just minerals, but memories of an earlier planet, suspended in silence. What allowed the cave to form was a unique convergence of geology and heat. Beneath Nika Mountain, magma chambers warmed the water to over 130 degrees, dissolving minerals into a perfect solution. In the flooded cave, over hundreds of thousands of years, the crystals grew molecule by molecule, an evolution of stone. But when mining operations drained the groundwater to access ore, the process stopped. The chamber dried, the crystals ceased growing, and exposure to air began degrading them. Scientists rushed to study the formations before the cave was lost. In 2015, the pumps were turned off. The water returned. The cave flooded again. Its alien cathedral was sealed once more, hidden beneath a mountain, left to continue its slow, silent growth. The Cave of the Crystals is now inaccessible. It remains one of the most dangerous natural environments ever explored, a world where life exists in forms no one predicted, where heat, pressure, and time carved something so fragile it had to be left untouched to survive. It forces us to reconsider what we think of as life, to realize that evolution is not just biological. It can be mineral, chemical, geological, that even in the stillness of stone there is movement, slow, invisible, powerful. The cave is a monument to patience, to conditions that must align so precisely they occur only once in eons, to organisms that wait without breathing, to structures that shimmer like frozen light, immune to time. And it leaves us with a question that lingers like the heat of the chamber. What else might be growing in silence, far beneath us, in worlds we were never meant to enter? It started with a broken wall, and ended with a city underground. In 1963, a man in the Cappadocia region of central Turkey was renovating his home. When he knocked down a wall in his basement, he expected stone and soil. Instead, he found a tunnel, and beyond it, rooms carved into the earth, chambers that twisted deeper and deeper into the ground. He had uncovered something vast. What he discovered was Derinkuyu, a city buried beneath the Anatolian plateau, hidden in darkness for centuries. Derinkuyu extends more than 280 feet below the surface. It spans at least 18 levels, carved directly into volcanic rock. The city could house up to 20,000 people. And it wasn't just a refuge. It was a civilization underground. There were kitchens, schools, stables, wine presses, chapels, and ventilation shafts that still function today. Narrow passageways connected large communal rooms. Rolling stone doors, weighing hundreds of pounds, could seal off entire sections of the city from invaders. And Derinkuyu wasn't alone. It connected to other subterranean cities by tunnels that stretched for miles, forming a network of life beneath the earth. The conventional explanation is that early Christians used these spaces to escape persecution, that they hid here, prayed here, survived here during dangerous times. And certainly some of the chapels and iconography support this view. But the complexity suggests something deeper, older, carving nearly 4 million cubic feet of rock without modern tools, engineering ventilation systems capable of supporting thousands and linking multiple cities through hand-dug tunnels. This wasn't a short-term hideout. This was infrastructure, planning, knowledge. Some archaeologists believe the earliest levels may have been excavated by the Phrygians around 1200 BCE. Others argue the origins stretch even further back, to cultures lost to written history. Who built it? And why did they go underground? Perhaps it was for protection, from war, from weather, from something we can no longer imagine. Perhaps it was a way to endure cycles of collapse, to preserve knowledge and community beneath the chaos of the surface world. Walking through Derinkuyu today, the weight of stone presses from above, and the silence echoes with forgotten lives. Visitors move only through the upper levels. Lower levels remain closed, some because they're unsafe, others because they've yet to be fully mapped. Even now, new rooms and passages are still being discovered. Derinkuyu reminds us that cities are not always built toward the sky, that human ingenuity adapts not only to mountains and rivers, but to the depths of the earth, that beneath the feet of modern towns, entire worlds can lie buried, waiting. It raises unsettling possibilities. How much of our history remains hidden? How many civilizations retreated into the earth, leaving behind only silence and stone? The surface tells one story, but Derinkuyu tells another, one carved in darkness, one measured not in monuments, but in tunnels, and one that asks, softly but insistently, what else have we forgotten beneath the ground we think we know? In the vast emptiness of Siberia, where the land stretches to the horizon in frozen silence, strange things have begun to open. For centuries, the Yakut people told stories about the Valley of Death, a forbidden place where metal domes rose from the earth, glowing at night, making people sick. They spoke of gateways, of entrances to an underworld beneath the permafrost. Few believed them. These were legends, they said, myths from a time before memory. Then, in 2014, the earth tore open. A crater appeared in the Yamal Peninsula. Over 200 feet wide, its walls were near perfectly cylindrical, as if punched out by a giant drill. Soon, more followed, some larger, some deeper, some with no clear bottom. The explanation came quickly: methane. As permafrost thawed due to warming temperatures, pockets of trapped gas built pressure until the earth exploded. It made sense, but only up to a point. Why now? Why here? And what lies beneath? Expeditions descended into the craters. They found signs of intense heat, charred rock, melted ice. They also found caves branching away from the main shafts, passages carved not by erosion, but by something else, something sudden, something violent. Then came the instruments, magnetic anomalies, malfunctioning compasses, readings that didn't match the surrounding geology. Metallic debris was found, too regular to be natural, too old to be Soviet. Some said it was ancient. Others didn't know what to say. The legends had spoken of sickness, disorientation, structures buried beneath the ground. Now the science was beginning to speak the same language. As the permafrost continues to thaw, new entrances open. In some cases, villagers have reported entire cave mouths appearing where there was once only ice. Underground air rushes out, thick, warm, unfamiliar. Sometimes it carries smells of sulfur or rot. Sometimes it's silent. The area is so vast and so remote that most of it has never been surveyed. Satellite images can't see through snowdrifts and ice caps, and the thaw is unpredictable. What's buried today may be open tomorrow. Some researchers have suggested that these openings might lead to massive underground systems, sealed for tens of thousands of years, preserved by cold. If so, they could contain ancient life, or ancient structures, or both. But few dare to go far. The terrain is dangerous, the ground shifts, the air can be toxic, and some who've gone too deep have failed to return. The Yakut people still warn outsiders to stay away, not out of superstition, but from memory. To them, the Valley of Death isn't metaphor, it's history. We call them craters, they call them mouths, openings, and the question they leave behind is simple and terrifying. What exactly is the earth trying to tell us, now that it has begun to open its jaw? From above, it's just a circle of deep blue in the turquoise waters of the Bahamas, a tranquil, perfect eye staring up from the sea. But beneath that serene surface lies something far stranger. Dean's Blue Hole is the deepest known underwater sinkhole on Earth. It plunges 663 feet straight down, a vertical shaft carved into the seafloor. For most, it's simply a curiosity, an oddity for divers and geologists. But for those who've descended into its depths, Dean's Blue Hole becomes something else entirely, something impossible. At first, it behaves like other blue holes. The water is still, the descent is clear, even beautiful. Sunlight filters down, turning the limestone walls a radiant blue. But past a certain depth, light begins to fade. Pressure builds. The human body begins to rebel. Below 100 feet, nitrogen narcosis sets in, an intoxicating fog. Below 200, the body needs specialized gas to survive. Beyond 400, only a handful of technical divers can function. And yet, those few who have reached the bottom report something astonishing. The hole doesn't end. Horizontal passages extend from the base like arteries from a heart, leading away into darkness. Tunnels carved into the rock, branching in multiple directions. No one knows how far they go. No one has the technology or the time to follow them. Free diver William Trubridge, who set a world record here, described the descent as surreal. He spoke of silence so complete, it felt like pressure, of darkness that seemed to pull, of entering a place not meant for human presence. Theories abound. Some scientists believe these tunnels were formed during the last ice age, when sea levels were lower and the cave was dry. If true, they could connect to an entire system of submerged passages. Caves that were once walked by ancient humans, or animals long extinct, now flooded, unreachable, sealed in time. What fossils might lie within? What artifacts? What records? What life? The water at these depths is still, heavy, and unmoving. Any disturbance could cloud visibility or collapse delicate structures. Exploration requires technology that doesn't yet exist. The risk is simply too great, so the tunnels remain untouched, unmapped, unknown. Dean's Blue Hole is a reminder that some of Earth's secrets are hidden not in vast mountain ranges or remote forests, but just beneath the surface of beauty, in places we think we understand. It's a scar in the seafloor, a whisper of the world as it was 10,000 years ago. A door that leads sideways into chambers no diver has ever entered, and it raises the question, what waits in those underwater corridors, in the stillness we cannot reach? The hole leads somewhere. We just don't know where, or if we ever will. In the jungles of the Yucatan Peninsula, where vines cling to crumbling stone and heat shimmers off ancient ruins, the Maya built a civilization that gazed both to the stars and into the earth. To them, caves were not just geological features, they were portals, entrances to Xibalba, the place of fear, a realm where the gods of death held court, where the souls of the dead journeyed and were tested. And it wasn't just mythology. Beneath the surface of the Yucatan lies one of the most extensive underwater cave systems on Earth. Known as cenotes, these flooded passages stretch for hundreds of miles through limestone bedrock. They connect like veins, winding below the jungle, beneath cities, temples, and pyramids. In 2018, divers exploring the Saskatoon system, then measured at over 215 miles, found something extraordinary. More than 100 feet below the water table, they discovered human remains, stone tools, burned wood, and even the bones of extinct animals like giant sloths and ancient gomphotheres. And the remains were old, more than 10,000 years old, long before the rise of the Maya. The implications were staggering. These caves weren't just sacred to the Maya. People had been entering them since the end of the last ice age, before the pyramids, before cities, before written language. The caves contained evidence of burial, of fire, of ritual, a continuum of use stretching across forgotten centuries. One chamber in particular defied explanation. Its tunnels twisted for miles, yet the formations inside, columns, arches, and chambers, appeared too regular to be natural, too geometric, almost architectural, and within them, artifacts, idols, tools, things placed deliberately and then left to the water and darkness. Geologists still debate how some of these cave passages formed. Their paths don't match typical erosion patterns. Some believe they were widened, shaped, altered. If so, by who? And why? Some of the artifacts are Maya. Others predate the civilization entirely. Still others seem to bear marks from both, a layering of belief and purpose. To the Maya, Xibalba was real, and in a way they may have been right. These caves lead to a world sealed off not by myth, but by water, a place where history sank and remained untouched. The cold preserves bones. The darkness preserves context. The result is a time capsule unlike any other, a place where the footsteps of ancient humans remain beside those of extinct creatures, a place where civilizations may have passed torches of knowledge underground long before they built monuments above, and still new chambers are being found, new passages mapped, new secrets rising from the flooded dark. We like to think of the underworld as a metaphor, but here, beneath the Yucatan, it's stone and silence, bone and memory, a real underworld. And it makes us wonder how much of human history still lies in flooded halls, waiting for breath, for light, for recognition, and how much will we never see, lost in the sacred dark. It began, as so many mysteries do, with a story people wanted to laugh at, but couldn't quite ignore. Mount Shasta, in Northern California, rises over 14,000 feet. Snow-capped, solitary, and steeped in myth, it dominates the landscape. For native peoples, it was a sacred place, home to spirit beings and ancient guardians. But in the 19th century, a new kind of story began to spread, stranger, harder to dismiss. A young man named Frederick Spencer Oliver claimed that while hiking the mountain, he encountered beings who led him into vast underground chambers. There, he said, lived the Lemurians, survivors of a lost continent who had retreated into the mountain to preserve their knowledge and civilization. His account, published in 1905 as A Dweller on Two Planets, described technologies far ahead of their time. Energy transmission devices, subterranean vehicles, radiant crystals. The story read like science fiction. And yet, it didn't fade. Over the next century, more people came forward with their own accounts. Hikers who encountered robed figures that vanished into the rock. Researchers who described cave entrances leading to rooms with smooth walls and geometric precision. Strange lights seen glowing from within the mountain at night. Unexplained sounds. Equipment that stopped working. In the 1930s, a man named Guy Ballard added fuel to the fire. He claimed personal encounters with the Lemurians, even receiving teachings from them. His writings inspired a spiritual movement that still exists today. Critics called it fantasy, but others weren't so sure. Geologists confirm that Mount Shasta is riddled with lava tubes and natural caves, a product of its volcanic past. Some stretch deep into the mountain. Not all have been mapped. Some have never been entered at all. In the 1970s, researcher William Hamilton interviewed people who claimed to have ventured deep underground. They described machinery, chambers with artificial lighting, passages that extended for miles. One spoke of finding a sealed door, impenetrable, silent, and cold. Skeptics argue it's all myth, fed by folklore, imagination, and confirmation bias. And maybe they're right, but the persistence of the story, across generations, across cultures, demands attention. What draws so many to this one mountain? Why do so many accounts, separated by decades, describe the same architecture, the same beings, the same sensations? Perhaps it's just a story that grew in the telling. Or perhaps Mount Shasta really is hollow in places we've yet to find. Legends often bloom where science has not yet stepped, and beneath Mount Shasta, much remains unexplored. The mountain stands silent. Its snow glows under the stars. And far below, beneath layers of lava and time, there may still be chambers no light has touched in 1,000 years. What if someone is still down there, waiting, What if the stories we dismiss are echoes of something buried too deep to reach, but not too deep to be remembered? In the earth beneath our feet, there are places that seem built for secrecy. In 1974, deep beneath the city of Puebla, Mexico, a tunnel system was discovered that had been hidden for centuries. But it was in Turkey, a decade earlier, that the earth opened up to reveal something far stranger, an underground metropolis of staggering complexity. In the region of Cappadocia, known for its soft volcanic rock and surreal landscapes, a man renovating his home accidentally unearthed the entrance to a vast, hidden world. Behind a wall in his basement was a corridor. That corridor led to chambers. Those chambers led to stairwells, passageways, ventilation shafts, descending level after level into the earth. The city was called Derinkuyu. What archaeologists found there challenged everything they thought they knew about ancient engineering. This wasn't just a shelter, it was a full-scale subterranean city, 18 stories deep, capable of housing over 20,000 people. There were kitchens, wells, schools, stables, wineries. Massive stone doors could be rolled into place to seal off sections. Air shafts provided ventilation so precise that fresh air could reach even the deepest levels. The tunnels were designed for defense and concealment, but also for long-term survival. And the construction? No modern tools, no metal scaffolding. Just human hands and knowledge that seems to exceed the capabilities of the time. Historians suggest early Christians may have used the city to escape Roman persecution. But some of the tunnels and rooms predate Christianity by thousands of years. Some believe the city may have been started by the Phrygians. Others point further back, to Hittite origins, or even older. The sheer scale and planning defy conventional timelines. Why build so deep? Why devote generations of labor to hollow out a city the world wasn't meant to see? Even more mysterious, Derinkuyu isn't alone. It connects through miles of underground tunnels to other cities, Kaymakli, Uzkonak, and more. A network of shadow civilizations beneath the visible world. The full extent of these connections is still unknown. Many tunnels have collapsed. Others remain unexcavated. Some areas are too unstable or too dangerous to enter, and yet discoveries continue. In recent years, archaeologists using ground-penetrating radar found even more chambers, buried deeper than previously thought. They found rooms that had never been entered in modern times, spaces left exactly as they were, tools on the floor, soot on the ceilings. And questions remain, not just about who built these cities, but why they disappeared. What drove people underground? What threat did they face, so great it required vanishing from history itself? Derinkuyu is a monument to hidden resilience, a reminder that civilization doesn't always rise upward. It can go deep, retreating into the stone, waiting. Beneath the bustling towns of Cappadocia, beneath the roads and houses, lies silence. Rooms where thousands once lived, prayed, birthed and died. Entire lives carved into darkness. And at the deepest points, in tunnels still unmapped, something else may remain, not just stone, but memory, and the lingering sense that what we've uncovered is only a fraction of what still lies hidden below. What else have we built and buried and forgotten? Some places seem carved not just by nature, but by intention, by silence, by warning. In the far reaches of Siberia, in the Sakha Republic, where winter lasts most of the year and the land never fully thaws, there is a place the Yakut people have long avoided. They call it the Valley of Death. Not metaphorically, but quite literally. According to their legends, the valley holds metal structures that rise from the earth. Domes, arches, shapes that glow faintly at night. They speak of sickness befalling those who linger too long, of places that hum with unnatural energy, of entrances in the ground that swallow people whole, never to return. For decades, these tales were dismissed as folklore, until the Earth began to change. In 2014, as the permafrost melted at unprecedented rates, massive craters began appearing across the Siberian tundra. The first, on the Yamal Peninsula, was over 200 feet wide, an eerie, symmetrical wound in the earth. More followed. Perfect circles, steep walls, vast depths. Some showed signs of heat, as if formed by underground explosions. The explanation offered was scientific. Methane, gas trapped in thawing permafrost, building pressure until it erupted violently. But even this raised questions. Why were some craters so perfectly shaped? Why were there tunnels and caves beneath them? Why were strange metallic readings recorded in some regions? And what was that low hum people reported hearing before the ground gave way? Some expeditions found unusual debris, metal fragments that didn't match natural formations or human-made machinery. Others recorded magnetic anomalies strong enough to disrupt instruments. And always there was the presence of something more ancient, of structures buried deep below, preserved by cold and silence. Something that didn't quite fit into any known historical timeline. The Yakut legend spoke of these things long before modern instruments confirmed them. They warned of buried machines, ancient gates, and underground realms best left undisturbed. Today, the region remains mostly inaccessible. The terrain is brutal. The thawing ice is unpredictable, opening and sealing caves in a matter of days. Some explorers returned with stories of caverns lined with ice crystals that seemed to resonate, of chambers that descended beyond their lights, of a pressure they could feel but not explain. Others didn't return at all. What if the Valley of Death is not just legend and not just geology, but both? A place where ancient memory and emerging science converge. A region revealing not just natural collapse, but buried architecture, buried purpose. As the permafrost recedes, the Earth is unveiling secrets held for tens of thousands of years. Fossils, forgotten creatures, and perhaps forgotten knowledge. The Yakut elders still caution against entering these places. They say some doors, once opened, do not lead back. What lies beneath Siberia may not be a lost civilization or alien structure. It may be something simpler and more haunting. Proof that even the Earth keeps secrets it cannot, or will not, reveal. And the question that rises from the craters is not just what happened here, but what is about to return. The surface of our planet is mapped, measured, photographed from space. We believe we know its shape, its boundaries, its history. But beneath that surface, there is still darkness. And in that darkness, there are questions no satellite can answer. 10 caves, 10 entrances into the unknown. Each led to something that shouldn't exist. Some revealed ecosystems untouched for millions of years, where life evolved in silence, without the sun. Others uncovered architectural marvels carved deep into stone by hands we cannot identify, for reasons we no longer understand. Some offered evidence of civilizations older than our textbooks allow. Others hinted at phenomena that break the rules, of physics, of biology, of what we think is possible. A cave that seemed bottomless, a cavern of crystals that revived ancient microbes, a tunnel system beneath the Yucatan where fire once burned in places now submerged, a hole in the Bahamas that continues into unexplored, unreachable passageways. And always a feeling that we've only just begun to glimpse what the Earth is hiding. Modern science calls for evidence, for certainty. And that is right. But some truths begin not with proof but with curiosity, with the willingness to look deeper, even when the darkness offers no promise of answers. Throughout history, those who ventured into these caves returned changed. If they returned at all, they brought stories of silence that felt alive, of lights that defied explanation, of structures no one remembered building. Their accounts were often ridiculed, sometimes ignored, but the caves remained, and they continue to open. New systems are discovered every year, in jungles, in deserts, beneath the sea. Some are mapped, most are not. Some are sealed again by nature, or by those who fear what further exploration might reveal. These are not stories of monsters or conspiracies. They are stories of wonder, of limits tested and boundaries blurred, of places that force us to ask, what else don't we know? Caves are time capsules, biological vaults, and geological records, but they are also mirrors. They reflect our desire to reach the unreachable, to understand what lies beyond the edge of light. What if beneath our feet there are still worlds, not in fantasy, but in fact? What if memory lives in stone? What if the earth, like us, has a subconscious, layers of buried thought and forgotten past, waiting to be uncovered? These caves are not just passages through rock. They are invitations to doubt what we've been told, to explore what we've ignored, to wonder not just about what's out there, but what lies below. Because sometimes the greatest mysteries are not in the stars. They are in the silence under our own ground. And they are waiting, still waiting, for someone to find the entrance and to ask the question, what if the earth is deeper than we ever dared to imagine?